Hello and welcome everyone to this past marathon open source. We're excited you could join us today for Geovanny Hernandez's session, How You Can Keep Your SQL Code Protected with Git. This past marathon features back-to-back live webinars delivered by expert speakers from the past community. The sessions will be recorded and posted online after the event. You will receive an email letting you know when the recordings are available. My name is Jamila James, and I work as an independent financial analyst, leveraging technology to help startups and small businesses establish and grow their finance functions. I have a few introductory slides about our presenter today before I hand the reins over to Geovanny. Next. If you require technical assistance, please type your request into the question pane located on the right side of your screen, and someone will assist you. This question pane is also where you may ask any questions throughout the presentation. Feel free to enter your questions at any time, and once we get to the Q&A portion of the session, I'll read your questions aloud to Geovanny. You are able to zoom in on the presentation content by using the zoom button located on the top of the presentation window. Please note that there will be a short evaluation at the end of the session, which will pop up after the session ends in your web browser. Your feedback is really important to us for future events, so please take a moment to complete this. Next. As you can see, there are many ways to keep learning all year long by visiting pass.org and checking out all of the free educational resources available to PASS members. Connect, share, and learn. Next. A bit about our gracious presenter before we get started. This past marathon session is presented by Geovanny Hernandez. Geovanny is passionate about databases and teaching. He is a database engineer and Microsoft certified trainer and has more than 12 years experience in software development. He has been working in different industries such as online games, publishing and banks, involved in migration projects, upgrades, and performance tuning on MS SQL Server solutions. Geovanny is also very involved in the SQL community, especially with the past Malaga group in Spain and other virtual events for students and professionals in universities from Nicaragua, Central America. And without further ado, here is Geovanny with how you can keep your SQL code protected with Git.
Thank you very much, Jamila, and thank you all the great team of PASS for this opportunity. Well, basically, I would like first of all to present the agenda. Our agenda will be split in two main areas: the introduction to SSDT, a road to DB DevOps, and finally, we will start with Git and keeping your DB code under control, which sounds a little strange, but no, at the end of the story, you will realize that it's very important. Why? Well, SSDT. First of all, SSDT is a SQL Server data tool. Why is important to think in how we can start to do DevOps to our database? Well, let me to explain from my experience and from my personal story about some topic problem that we face when we are talking about a database. Historically, imagine that you are working with a team. This team has a person in charge of front-end develop, other person is a back-end develop, and how this team work together to finally deploy a product. But historically, the database don't have a way to represent code in the best, we can say, in a suitable way to deploy throughout the different pipeline. Due to this situation, I decided some times ago to start to work in a very, very exciting area related to DevOps for database. The world, the development world has experimented a lot of amazing changes during the last years. But for me, in terms of development, one of the most important has been represented by the Agile Manifesto. In the Agile Manifesto, we have one specific, the first principle behind this Agile Manifesto, which represent a group of good practice to delivering proper source code or to delivering proper IT project. And this principle contain a very important word, keywords, continuous delivery. 10, before to think in start to do or to develop DB source code with quality, we need to think, okay, what is the best way that I have to start working in a proper way with database? The tools that we will use during this session are basically Git, of course, Visual Studio, and finally SQL Server. Okay, I mentioned SQL Server data tool, but I believe that the best way to show you why it's important, SSDT, is throughout the use of example. But SSDT we can define like an integrate component which is part of Visual Studio ecosystem and help us to manage the life cycle to DB project. Another important section related to SSDT that SSDT is a toolset that allows professional database and application developer to carry out whole their database design work for SQL Server and SQL Azure within Visual Studio. What it means in short words, that we can have the opportunity to develop our DB code as part of a team and using a standard IDE as Visual Studio. But once that you have the SSDT ready, you can or you need to start working with source code control and automate changes. What are some benefits of using SSDT? Well, imagine the classic sample adventure work. Okay, you have adventure work and you can have one project in Visual Studio which use SSDT, and this project contain all the logic, all the representation of your object, and you can work directly on it without necessity to connect a Management Studio. Other important benefit is that you can inspect the code. You can detect any kind of error without deploying on production or in lower environment. This is a magic word for me, artifact. Why? Because at the end of the story, an artifact, which is the result of an SSDT project, allow us to manage these key components throughout the pipeline in our software development code. And finally, the unit test. If we have SSDT, we are be able to start doing and to start thinking in advance with unit test, which is a very important part of every development. 10, we have talked about artifact and we have talked about DACPAC. Well, 10, let me to show you quickly a simple example. For this section, we have my example database that I call basically SQL Saturday. In here, for example, I have some tables, some information, which is interesting and basically represent different tables for the classic SQL Saturday event. Okay, then here, let me to show you the SSDT, and I have a classic Visual Studio solution. I am opening right now, and in this moment, okay, it's loading, and here you can see the structure. This project, at the end of the story, this SSDT project represents basically a database. Then, with this information, you can start to programming. Like, imagine that in the classic way, like if you are develop a unit test, or if you are develop any kind of code, with the only difference that you are develop code for your database. For instance, I have store procedure, right click, add, and store procedure. It open which kind of object I have available in SSDT, and I can see perfectly programmability and choose, in this case, a store procedure, and assign a specific name. With this information, I can have the possibility to deploy this code directly into my target server. How? Let me to show you. Basically, you have the opportunity to right click, for instance, to publish, and with this option you can perfectly deploy the code of your project into your target server. Okay, I prefer to use a specific functionality, which is a SQL package. And once that you have complete this procedure, this is a very simple demo, you can rebuild. When you do a rebuild, it internally, the SSDT will try to regenerate a new DAC pack, which is basically an artifact that you can use and distribute throughout the different environment that you have as part of your DevOps pipeline. Okay, then let me to publish this change. My change is so simple. It's a dummy procedure one. Internally, it contains a publish definition, which tell internally where it needs to deploy it. Once that it has completed, and if I connect again to my Azure client, and let me to review programmability, store procedure, and now I have this new store procedure that I have created. Then, my point is, before to think about applied DevOps strategy and about continuous integration, continuous delivery, you always, from the perspective of database, you need to have an artifact that you can deploy it. Once you have this artifact, you can continue with the strategy of keeping your source code. 10. Why do we need a source control system? The answer is easy. We are not working isolated. We work into different teams. It means that we are in charge of do some changes, but these changes need to be shared throughout the rest of people that are part of our team. Sometimes we are working in different changes that need to wait that other changes from other colleague being integrated. In this part, I would like to mention a colleague that I have called Eric Lopez. Eric Lopez was a great colleague, a very clever guy. And I remember some time ago when we started to discuss about the different system that we have for the source control. And I remember that he taught me about the use of a rational clear case, which was almost a nightmare product. It was so difficult to keep tracking the change in the structure of our file, and obviously in that moment we didn't work with this kind of technology as DACPAC, and was so hard to have this project, to manage this kind of project. Fortunately, with the pass of the time, we had a conversation, and I remember that he recommended me, no, Gio, you need to start to think in another option like Git. And some time ago, I took the advice of Eric Lopez and I started to work with Git. What is the great part with Git? Well, I can tell you that it's very simple in terms of the rest of a source code control system that exists. Other part is that probably is the most used source control system around the world. And finally, another great benefit is that it doesn't matter if you are a DB developer, if you are a .NET developer, is agnostic about what kind of technology you use. But what is the other interesting part about Git? Well, imagine that we have, according to this diagram, we have our server computer, which hosts the source, hold the source code of our project. And we have computer A and we have computer B, which are updated and we contain all the changes. But if for any reason the server computer crash, got down, we can perfectly upload all the code that we have into the computer A and becoming in our news server. It sounds trivial, but in reality, this is so much powerful. Why? Because at the end of the story, Git is a distributed version control, and it's storing the complete history of every change that we do in our code. How it work? I would like only mention you before to start with the demo. Imagine that we had our initial version, version 1. We have a group of file A, B, and C. At the end of the story, every version that we have in Git represents a snapshot of the status of different files in one specific moment. Oh, what does mean, Gio? Well, imagine that you are every time taking a snapshot, every time that you want, taking a snapshot, and if something goes wrong or if something happened, you can move to a specific snapshot or to a specific version and restore this information and start to tracking every change that you need to do in your code. This is very powerful, and at the end of the story, I believe that probably is one of the reasons that Git is so very popular. Then, let me to start with the demo time for this. I forget to mention that in this case, normally when you start to Git, the majority of people use some specific client, source tree, I don't know, Smart Git, whatever, no? But for this presentation, I decided to show you simple concept using simple tool. In this case, simple tool means Git Bash. Okay. Once you have installed Git, you have access to Git Bash, which is this code, this simple application which is integrated as part of Git. I hope that you can see perfectly. Then initially, it connects to a specific folder, the default folder. Then let me to move to the specific folder that I have prepared for this session. Okay, perfect. Then let me to do exactly the first step that you need to do when you are starting with a new project. Basically, it consists in initialize your repo. What does mean that? Is the first step that you need to follow for specify that in a specific folder or in a specific area of your computer, you want to create your first repo. Then in this case, I am created my first repo that I call pass. Then Git initially, if I move here to Git pass, initially it has created a group of internal and hidden file for starting to tracking every change that I do inside this repo and this folder. Then always you need to move to this specific folder, and this is a very interesting part. Git is composed a lot of different labels, but the label basically represent different way to call uh, some part of your repo. For example, master. Keeping simple. Master basically is the main branch or the main branch that is part of your repository. Always that you start something from scratch, or even if you see GitHub and you try to clone GitHub project, always the first branch that you can see is the master branch. Okay. Then I have created a new repo. The repo is basically empty. I don't have anything in there. Okay, it's time. It's time to copy our SSDT project. And this is the interesting part that I want to show you. Remember that I started to talk about SSDT. This session is not focused on SSDT, but I needed to show you how to have basically an artifact that you can use. Then let me to copy this SQL Saturday Git, and I will paste in the past repo. Try again. Let me to close temporary my Visual Studio instance. Okay. Then right now I have copy and paste my new artifact, my new Visual Studio project that it should be available once that I upload this repo for everyone who needs access to SQL Saturday database. Then let me return here to Git and do a git diff. Git diff is a basic command which show you any kind of difference between the last commit that I did one by one. Let me to explain in a little what it means commit. Okay. Gen status. Okay. With this simple instruction, I am asking to Git, okay, I want to know what happened until now. And I want to return to the presentation before to continue here. Because I consider that it's very important that you understand how Git working internally. Git basically has a Git workflow which consists in 3 different stages for calling in a simple way. The working directory, the staging area, and finally the Git directory or repository. Okay, what is the working directory? The working directory represents all the file and all the information that we decide to put inside our repo. Remember when I copy and paste the SQL Saturday's Visual Studio solution? Well, from the moment that I paste this complete project inside the working directory, it become parts of the working directory. If I do any change on this code in every file of this repo, immediately it tracking and it reflect that the working directory had some changes in some specific file. But it doesn't mean that this change has persisted internally. No. How it can get that? Basically, when you decide to explicitly do a git add command, you decide to move this changed file from working directory to a staging area. In this way, Git is telling you, okay, you have changed a list of file, and now you have decided that this list of file need to be moved to an staging area. A staging area, imagine that you are in a room, you have changed uh, something in the room, but you have decided to, okay, I have this specific thing and I need to move to a specific corner. And this corner is an staging area. The final step consists in commit this file that you previously put in the staging area, and you decide to move to the Git directory repository. Then imagine that you open the door of your room and move the list of files that you have in the staging area outside and storing in the Git directory repository. One that you have committed this file, I mean, moving from a staging area to the Git directory, this file are ready to push to your specific repository, your remote repository, which is basically, if we remember a previous image, the server computer. 10. Try to do a briefly summary. You start to do changes. These changes are in your working directory. Later, you decide to add this complete list of file into staging area. And finally, you commit this file that were in the staging area, and you push to the server computer. Once that you push to the server computer, is available for everyone who need to get the last version of this code. Returning to the Git Bash, how I move from working directory to a staging area? Well, basically with the command add. You do a git add, and you have two options. You can go one by one, writing the name of the file that you want to add, or simply git add dot. Put attention to the red color of this list of file, which I copy and paste, okay? Then git add dot, enter. Okay. So now I move from working directory to a staging area. And finally, in this point, I want to do a commit. What does it mean? Moving to the Git directory for storing this information. Enter. The Git commit has a very simple structure. Let me to put again. You write the command git commit -m for defining the message that you need to write. Normally, it's a good practice to define a specific and very self-explanation, self-explanatory message, and basically enter. Now, what is the next section? Well, you have commit your changes, but currently your repo only know that it is part of a Git repo in your local computer. But if you need to move this information to a specific repo on the cloud, then you need to define first. For this case, in this event, I prepared a repo in Azure, which is called SQL Saturday. I have the address for cloning this information, and I include it as part of the command that I have here. Okay. By default, Git remote identified the label origin. For instance, if you go to GitHub and you decide to clone an existing repo, normally automatically it will assign the origin label, but you can use a specific name if you want. For this example, let me to do simple git remote add origin. What it tried to do in this point, it will identify that every chain that you want to upload, it need to be redirect to this specific repo that you have on the cloud. Let me to do enter. Then in this point, we have add our code. We into the Git directory. We commit. We indicate to Git where is the repo on the cloud, but we need to check the Git status. What it means? Okay, if for any reason you have some pending changes to do on the staging area, on the working directory, Git status will show you which change are pending. In this case, nothing is pending because you have commit every chain. 10. What is the next? Well, I have my chain, I commit, but I need to push this file to the cloud, specifically to this repo in the Azure platform. Then you need to do a git push. Git push basically identify that it has to tracking every change and send all the changes that are in the Git directory to a specific or to a specific server. Which server? Origin. And origin is the definition that we did before. Git push, and internally it basically uploading all the code. If I return to my SQL Server DB project here, and let me to refresh, enter, and now you can see the code that I have been uploading right now with all the definition that I wanted to have. Okay, and finally, this is the first part. Okay, then let me continue with another interesting section related with Git, which is the Git flow. What happened? Normally, we are not supposed to be working on master every time. No, there is a series of good practice. Uh, I believe that probably one of the most important area in Git are related to the good practice. And branching is probably one of the most important. Why? Because if you have defined a proper Git flow and branching strategy, you can avoid many error and many problems. Remember, the master represent the original branch that we have when we create a new repo. But we have the option to create an auxiliary or a new branch called develop, and obviously feature. You can see, you can search on Google about branching strategy. There is a very interesting document about this subject, which explain you in detail what are the best option or the most suitable option for your company. But in this case, I want to do a briefly summary. Master, always you need to be to always you need to have master because it's the default branch. Later, you can and you should define a develop branch. The master should be equal to the code that you have on production. Develop should represent all the changes that you have, and every developer can be working in feature branch. The feature branch can represent a story and a specific feature that the developer are working on it, and basically every time that this feature has completed, it needs to be merged or combined into develop. And finally, after a group of features has been finished, you can merge all these last codes from develop into master as part of your strategy. But let me to show you this throughout simple demo. Continue with Git, and the first thing, okay, the Git checkout -b and develop. What does it mean? Basically, you are moving your the pointer of Git to a specific branch. Which branch? Develop. And the -b means that if this branch doesn't exist, it has to create. Let me to do it. Okay. 10, it has created a new branch called develop, and currently we are in the develop branch. How you know this? Basically, seeing this label, this area in blue color, this label. It means that we are in the develop branch. 10, okay, I have created this branch, but I need to push this branch to be recognized internally into the SQL Saturday repo. Because if you see here, I only have master, which is the default branch. I need to do a git push. Okay, and continue. Okay, I am moving to checkout master. Okay, all is okay in this part. And let me to start to working in a new feature branch. How can I do this easily? Git checkout -b, like in the past, feature, and the name of the branch that we are creating. Normally, this should represent the specific user story convention or a very meaning name. And finally here, we indicate from which branch we want that this feature branch was born. Okay, and it has created and he has moved to this branch. 10, it's time to play with our SSDT project. Perfect. 10, right now we have our SSDT project, we have our basically our Git repo. Our repo is on Azure platform, and basically every developer can download the code, the repo, can perfectly clone the repo, start to work on a new feature. And this quick demo, I will do some simple like add a new store procedure. We have a store procedure 1. Let me to add another store procedure. I will put store procedure number 2. And I am changing speed to, okay, 1 second, speed 1. Okay, I have created this new store procedure. Let me to save this store procedure. Perfect. And now I return to Git, and I will do a git add dot. What does it mean? Basically, Git has detected that in the working directory, I had some change. What is the change? Basically, that I added the procedure to .SQL. Then what is the next step? Okay. I need to do a commit, a Git commit. I need to indicate a specific message, and I am, remember, moving from the working directory to staging with git add, and now I am storing the information in the Git directory doing a commit. Okay, sorry. And what is the next step? Well, basically, let me to check all is clean, and I will do a git push. Let me to show you again the Azure platform. We only have right now master. It should have created the develop too. Okay, then I have master and I have develop. Now I will push all my changes into the Azure repo, and I should have feature SSC0001. Let me return here. I will refresh. And now, a part of master and develop, I have my new feature. Okay. And now I want to mention a very important part that not necessarily is related to Git, but is, is be considered as integral part of any kind of source code repository, and Git offer this possibility. Pull request. What is a pull request? Basically, for me, it's so simple. It's a way to learning. Imagine that you are working in a team and you have decided to working on a specific feature, and you are basically you have completed all the information and all the development that you need, and you want to deploy on production. No, it's not a good idea. Why? Because probably we are committing some mistake or not following some good practice. Then throughout the pull request, you have the opportunity that other people checking your code mention some kind of detail and try to following good practice before to deploy on production your code. How you can do this? Well, basically in many platforms you have the option, like in this case with Azure, to go to the pull request option and define, okay, who want to open the pull request? Geovanny Hernandez, okay, assigned to Geovanny Hernandez, and which target branch, okay, feature, new pull request. And finally, you need to define, okay, the feature branch need to be merged into develop. And you know why? I want to add hi G Hernandez, which can be perfectly another user, to checking the code on this. Let me to choose another. Okay, this on another user and create. Well, I have an issue with the user, but normally you need to assign a permission to the specific user, and this user will receive an invitation to be part of your pull request interaction. Well, 10. What is very important to you remember always? Git is a series of commands that you can use independently of which source code you are interacting. Can be database, can be C# or whatever language programming that you are using. But the most important is to know what exactly mean every command. Probably in the majority of cases, you will never work directly with Git Bash or this kind of command line tool. Probably you will have the opportunity to use SmartGit, SourceTree, TurtleGit, or other different clients. But the most important at the end of the story is to understand what we are doing. Remember, Git is so powerful and is the perfect way that you have to start control your Git code. to control your source code in a very consistent way. The other great benefit is that Git is used for different kind of company around the world and can be easily integrated into the Azure, Atlassian, or Jira tools and many other options too. 10. To recap, DevOps of database. Remember, the key is to develop and deploy as soon as possible in a very consistent way and without dependency of manual intervention. For this reason, you should have an artifact. An artifact in the Microsoft SQL Server world can be translated into an SSDT project. An SSDT project which will allow you to have full control of the code that you have in your database. And finally, you need a proper source control of this code because you are not in an island and you need to be in communication with the rest of your team. And you need to track in every change that you are doing in your source code. For this reason, Git probably, according to my experience, is the best option that you have to do. And finally, team working. Pull request is not only an elegant way to realize what is the nice code that my colleague is working. No, in reality, it's an excellent way to sharing knowledge and to validate the quality of the code that we are trying to put on production. Well, this is all from my side for now, and it's open to question. And Jamila has the control.
Thank you, Geovanny. Uh, there aren't any questions right now. So if someone has a question, you can go ahead and type it now. I'll give you a few seconds. If not, we will close the session. All right, I don't see any questions. Oh, actually, hold on, got one. Geovanny, they asked if there are any further references.
Sorry?
Are there any further references?
Like,
I'm guessing this is maybe like, are there further resources that they can tap into to learn more
okay,
about Git?
yeah, okay. I can do some self advertisement. No, in my website geohernandez.net, I have been started a series dedicated to Git, and where I try to explain the first step, the most common resource that you can use. For me, a excellent resource is there are two very interesting courses on Pluralsight about an introduction to Git. And a part of that, like as part of this presentation at the beginning, you have my email. Everyone who has any kind of doubt, any question, can feel free to ask me, to send me an email, and I will try to clarify any topic that probably you need to learn more. But at the end of the story, my simple advice in this case is when you start with Git, not forget that basically Git is a source code control, agnostic about your code. What does it mean? That it doesn't matter if you are working on SQL or Oracle or C# or whatever. At the end, internally, is try to do a string comparison and basically the other important part, because I suffer a lot at the beginning, is that you should read about some common label that Git assigned to different things. For instance, master, what is mean master, origin, and what in short terms means do a push or commit?
Okay, the next question is, would you manage permissions with Git? Are you able to manage permissions in the tool?
Yeah, but normally the permission need to be managed directly by the repo tool that you are using. What I mean, Git is basically the source code control platform. But imagine that you have some source code and you decide to upload this source code in GitHub. Well, in GitHub, you have the possibility to say, well, this repo is a private repo, and I only want to give permission to Gio and to Jamila, for instance. Then normally are this platform which allow you to define who has right or permission for a specific function. For Git, Git is agnostic. Think in Git like a kind of internal and very simple database which is in charge of tracking every chain in your local computer, in your local repo, and try to sync with the main target server repo.
Thank you. Okay, the
Okay.
next question is, can you save Python Pickle files to Git?
But
Can you save Python Pickle files to Git?
yeah, at the end, well, something that I didn't mention for time reason. In theory, you can even define to use big file for instance, image or whatever kind of file that you want without any restriction. But in many cases, by default, you have the option to download a git ignore file. This git ignore file is a file which allow you to define what kind of extension or what kind of file you want to exclude. Then the answer is simple. The answer is yes. But a complete answer is yes, and even you can define which kind of file you want to exclude to be tracking by Git.
Awesome. We had one clarification on the question about permissions. So the question is, what they meant to ask was, would you manage your database permissions with Git? So we understand that you're connecting the data from Git to, you can push it to the server. So are you able to manage those permissions in Git, or do you still need to manage those permissions on the database server side?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Well, I believe that I will not have enough time to answer this question because there is an open debate about how we can manage the permission throughout using SSDT project. Um, if the user want, can send me can put in contact with me throughout my email, and I can take more time to answer. The My short answer is that you need to decide if in reality you want to manage this throughout SSDT together with Git, and what are the restrictions in terms of security of your company. There is no an easy answer about this. Specifically, this question is more focused about from DB perspective, not about Git. But I invite to the user who asked this question to put in contact with me and give me a little more background and more detail, and I can advise him some option
Okay,
for this scenario.
so it sounds like the answer is it depends.
Absolutely, there is no there is no absolute facts or absolute true in this case.
Okay, our next question is about SQL Server data tools. Is it the best way to develop a database project? I mean, compared to Management Studio.
Mm, to be honest, my experience is that it will depend, sorry, about the organization that where you are working. But from my experience, it's very suitable to use SSDT. I almost never had problem. This not mean that it's perfect, but it's covered a lot of scenario. The other thing is that when you are working in Visual Studio, for instance, you can feel as part of your development team, because the rest of people in your team normally are using Visual Studio, and when you show them that you can work and can you use the same tool that they use, the first reaction is that, oh, you can do this in this SQL code in Visual Studio. Oh, nice, nice. And you have the opportunity to adopt the classic full stack methodology, where everyone can start to coding a T-SQL code inside a Visual Studio like other programming language. Then with this, I not tell you that it's perfect, no, but it's very suitable in many scenarios, and you can feel the reaction of many developers, and they can feel comfortable working in a common tool like Visual Studio. And for you, it doesn't mean if you are using SSDT or if you are using directly Management Studio at the end of the story.
Thank you. Okay, our
Yeah.
last question as we reach the top of the hour is you mentioned DACPack as the way to deploy the database. SQL Server Data Tool gives us another alternative, deployment script. What are the pros and cons between DACPack and these deployment scripts?
Yeah. Well, I believe that the best answer is for time reason. I don't believe that I can have enough time to answer. In SQL Saturday core, if you search SQL Saturday core, there is a presentation of Angela Rose. I was attending this session, and she posted the presentation with exactly that slide, pros and cons of SSDT versus a configuration script or migration script. Then I invite you, the user who asked this question, to search SQL Saturday Core 2019 and click in the Angela Rose presentation. I don't remember exactly which number of a slide, but she presented pros and cons and very nice option to analyze.
Okay, so that is Angela Rose SQL Server Saturday Cork.
Yeah, yeah,
Awesome. Thank
yeah.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to the end of our session. Thank you, Geovanny, and thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you, Yamila. Thank you all the people behind PAS. Has been an honor and a pleasure.
Ciao.
Ciao.